Power does not always enter a room wearing a uniform or announcing its rank. Sometimes it walks through the front doors in a tailored coat, says almost nothing, and quietly watches people reveal exactly who they are. Officer Blaine Mercer believed the black woman challenging him in the precinct lobby was powerless. He mocked her, struck her across the face, invented charges, and locked her in a cell where no official record could expose what he had done. He thought he had silenced another civilian. He had no idea the woman wiping blood from her lip was Alana Merritt, the new captain of the 54th Precinct, sent there with one mission: to tear corruption out by the roots. Rain swept across the windshield of an unremarkable gray sedan parked half a block from the 54th Precinct in downtown Bellwether City. Inside, Alana Merritt sat perfectly still, her hands resting lightly on the steering wheel. She was in her early 40s, composed, observant, and known throughout law enforcement for an intensity that never needed to become loud. After many years inside Chicago's Internal Affairs Division, she had dismantled corruption rings, helped send dishonest officers to prison, and survived the dangerous politics of a major metropolitan department without compromising her principles. Now she had been sent to Bellwether City. The mayor had personally requested her transfer and promised her complete authority to rebuild the 54th Precinct. The district had become one of the city's most expensive failures. Civil lawsuits drained public money. Complaints disappeared. Arrest reports contradicted surveillance footage. Residents avoided the lobby because asking for help often brought humiliation instead. The previous captain had left suddenly, beneath a cloud of unanswered questions, and the officers who remained had treated the leadership vacuum as permission to operate without limits. Deputy Chief Conrad Bellamy had warned Alana about the culture she was entering. The officers at the 54th were tightly connected, suspicious of outsiders, and loyal to one another, even when that loyalty required dishonesty. Many of them would resent any commander sent to investigate their habits. They would especially resent a black woman whose reputation had been built on refusing to look away. Her formal introduction was scheduled for the morning roll call. The department expected her to arrive in dress uniform, accompanied by senior command staff and the usual display of polished badges and official speeches. Alana chose a different approach. She wore a sharp charcoal trench coat over a black turtleneck and tailored slacks. Her badge remained hidden. No weapon was visible. Nothing about her appearance identified her as a police captain. To anyone inside the building, she would look like an ordinary citizen entering a public precinct to ask for help. That was exactly what she wanted. A command staff could have performed respect when senior officials were present. Alana wanted to see how her officers behaved when they believed no one important was watching. She stepped from the sedan into the cold rain, raised the collar of her coat, and walked toward the building. The precinct looked exhausted before she even crossed the street. Dark stains marked the brick facade. Several exterior lights were broken. Torn notices clung to a community bulletin case near the entrance. The building appeared less like a place of safety and more like a structure the city had forgotten. Alana pushed through the heavy glass doors. The smell reached her first. Cheap institutional coffee, floor wax, wet clothing, and the stale odor of too many people waiting too long in a poorly ventilated room. The lobby was sparsely occupied, yet it carried a low, anxious energy. Several civilians sat on hard plastic chairs, clutching forms and staring toward the front desk, with the defeated expressions of people who had already learned that help might never come. Behind thick protective glass sat Sergeant Vernon Pike, a heavy-set veteran who was giving his full attention to a smartphone while an elderly woman stood directly in front of him. Alana moved toward a bulletin board covered with outdated neighborhood notices. She pretended to read a faded flyer while keeping her eyes and ears focused on the desk. "Excuse me, officer," the elderly woman said. Her voice trembled from exhaustion and worry. "I have been waiting for a very long time. My grandson has not come home. I need to file a missing persons report." Pike did not look up. "I already told you, Mrs. Brooks. He is an adult. He is probably sleeping off a bad night somewhere. Go home and wait." "His name is Jordan," she replied. "He has never disappeared like this. He called me frightened and then the line went dead. Please, I only want someone to write down his name." Pike scrolled across his phone. "We do not open a report every time a grown man misses breakfast. Come back later if he is still gone." Mrs. Evelyn Brooks gripped the edge of the counter with both hands. Her shoulders shook beneath a worn brown coat. Before she could speak again, the reinforced security door leading to the rear offices opened. 2 patrol officers entered carrying steaming cups of coffee and laughing loudly enough to fill the lobby. Alana recognized them from the files she had studied. Officer Blaine Mercer was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with the casual arrogance of a man who believed the building belonged to him. His uniform was neat enough to satisfy inspection, but his expression held permanent contempt. Several complaints against him described unnecessary force, threats, missing property, and arrests that were later dismissed because the reports could not withstand review. Beside him walked Officer Curtis Vance, slightly shorter and far less disciplined in appearance. His shirt was wrinkled, his equipment hung carelessly from his belt, and his laughter had the eager quality of someone who gained confidence by standing beside a more feared man. Mercer leaned against the front counter, placing himself between Mrs. Brooks and Sergeant Pike. "Did you see the game last night, Vernon?" he asked. "Complete destruction." Mrs. Brooks drew a breath. "Please move aside. I was speaking with the sergeant." Mercer stopped with the coffee cup near his mouth. Slowly, he looked down at her. "Are you telling me how to behave inside my own precinct, Grandma?" "I am asking you to let me report my grandson missing," she said, though the strength in her voice was beginning to disappear. "Sergeant Pike already told you to leave," Vance said with a laugh. "We are police officers, not your personal babysitters." Alana felt the familiar cold anger that had carried her through years of corruption investigations. This was the decay she had been sent to remove. It was not simple laziness. It was open contempt for the people these officers had sworn to protect. She stepped away from the bulletin board and crossed the linoleum floor. Her heels clicked with quiet precision. The sound drew several eyes toward her. "Actually, officers," Alana said, her voice smooth and controlled. "Department policy allows a missing persons report to be filed immediately when the circumstances are unusual, when the missing person may be vulnerable, or when there are reasonable signs of danger. Since no one has even asked for her grandson's full name, you have no factual basis for dismissing her concern." The lobby went silent. Sergeant Pike finally lifted his face from the phone. Mercer turned slowly. His eyes moved from Alana's shoes to her face, measuring her. He saw no visible badge and no uniform. He saw a black woman in an expensive coat who had dared to quote policy in front of civilians. A condescending smile spread across his mouth. "Well, look at this," he said. "We have our own legal expert." He left the counter and closed the space between them. "Who are you supposed to be? The mayor's new diversity consultant?" "I am someone who expects public employees to perform the work the public pays them to do," Alana replied. Vance laughed behind him. "Careful, Blaine. She sounds dangerous." Mercer stepped closer until the smell of cheap cologne and stale tobacco surrounded Alana. "Listen carefully, lady. You walk in here, start lecturing officers, and create a disturbance, you can find yourself inside a holding cell. Turn around, leave the building, and mind your own business." Alana looked toward the silver badge on his chest. "Your badge number is 4492, Officer Mercer. Officer Vance, yours is 5103. Both of you are violating department standards governing civilian contact, professional conduct, and the acceptance of public reports." Mercer's face darkened. The smirk disappeared, replaced by the raw fury of a man who had never learned to distinguish embarrassment from threat. "Shut your mouth," he barked, raising one hand. Alana did not step away. "Are you going to make me?" The slap cracked across the lobby like a gunshot. Pain flared along Alana's left cheek. The force of Mercer's hand snapped her head aside and knocked a gold hoop earring free. It struck the linoleum, bounced once, then rolled in a small circle before falling still. No one moved. Mrs. Brooks covered her mouth with both hands. A man sitting near the wall rose halfway from his chair, then froze when Vance placed one hand near his baton. Behind the protective glass, Sergeant Pike pushed himself partly upright, his eyes wide, but he did not reach for the emergency button or order Mercer to stop. Alana slowly turned her face forward again. She did not touch her burning cheek. She did not stagger. She let her tongue move across the inside of her lower lip and tasted blood. When her eyes met Mercer's, fear was absent. Anger had already hardened into something colder. Her expression became calm, analytical, and almost empty, the look of an investigator watching a suspect make a confession without realizing it. For one brief second, Mercer hesitated. Then he remembered the audience. His ego could not tolerate retreat. "I told you to shut your mouth," he said, but a slight tremor had entered his voice. "You came in here creating a disturbance, and now you are trying to assault a police officer." Alana raised one eyebrow. A faint smile touched her split lip. "Assault? Is that what you call it when your hand strikes my face?" "She lunged at you," Vance said immediately, stepping beside his partner. "I saw it. She was acting unstable and threatening." The lie arrived too quickly to be improvised for the first time. Alana understood that covering for one another had become instinct. They did not discuss the truth. They selected a story that protected the uniform and repeated it until the citizen disappeared beneath it. "You are under arrest," Mercer announced, his confidence returning as Vance supported him. He seized Alana's left arm with enough force to bruise and turned her around. "On what charge?" Alana asked. She kept her voice level and offered no resistance. She knew that struggling would provide the first legitimate fact they could use against her. "Assaulting an officer, disorderly conduct, resisting arrest," Mercer replied as he pulled her arms behind her. "We will add whatever else fits when the paperwork is written." Vance removed a pair of steel handcuffs from his belt. He closed them around Alana's wrists and tightened them far beyond ordinary procedure. The metal pressed into bone and restricted circulation almost immediately. "Read her rights, Blaine," Vance said with an amused grin. Mercer pushed Alana toward the reinforced security door. "You have the right to remain silent," Vance whispered near her ear as he followed. "I strongly recommend that you use it unless you want to lose your balance on the way to processing. Anything you say will be used to make the rest of your day miserable." Alana said nothing. Every threat, every action, and every failure to intervene was becoming evidence. She memorized the position of each officer, the words used in the lobby, the condition of the restraints, and Sergeant Pike's deliberate silence. They guided her into a long corridor washed in sickly fluorescent light. The paint was scuffed. Floor tiles lifted at the corners. Alana looked toward the ceiling and saw several security cameras above the processing hallway. None of the small indicator lights were operating. The cameras had been disabled. The absence was too complete to be accidental. A precinct that regularly violated civil rights needed blind spaces, and someone had created them. "Keep moving," Mercer said, shoving her between the shoulder blades. They passed the official booking area without stopping. No one took fingerprints. No photograph was made. No arrest entry was created. They did not place her name into the computer system or document the charges they had announced. They were holding her outside the official process. Alana recognized the tactic immediately. A civilian could be placed in a cell, frightened, threatened, and released later without any record proving the detention had occurred. If the victim complained, the officers could deny everything. They reached the holding block at the rear of the precinct. The air smelled of ammonia, old concrete, and neglect. Vance unlocked the heavy door to cell 3. Mercer pushed Alana inside with enough force to make her stumble. She recovered her balance before falling and turned as the bars slammed shut. "Sit tight, legal expert," Mercer said, tapping his baton against the metal. "Maybe after some time alone, you will learn how to respect a police officer." He and Vance walked away laughing. Their voices echoed down the corridor until the reinforced door closed behind them. Alana released one long, controlled breath. Her cheek throbbed. Her hands were becoming numb. Yet beneath the pain was extraordinary clarity. The officers had given her more direct evidence in a few minutes than months of administrative review might have uncovered. She studied the cell. A metal bench was bolted to one wall beside an exposed toilet. On the far end of the bench sat a young woman wrapped inside a thin, ragged jacket. She appeared barely out of her teens. Fear widened her eyes as she looked at Alana. "They got you too," the young woman whispered. Alana sat beside her carefully, keeping her posture straight despite the cuffs. "What is your name?" "Tessa Munro." "Why are you here, Tessa?" The young woman's lips trembled. "I don't know. I was walking home from my shift at a diner. Officer Mercer stopped beside me and told me to get into his cruiser. I said no. He grabbed me and put me in the back. He said I matched the description of someone who stole from a store." "Were you processed?" Tessa shook her head. "No photograph. No fingerprints. No call." He keeps coming back and saying that if I cooperate with him, he can make the whole thing disappear. He says no one knows I'm here." A darker anger ignited behind Alana's eyes. Cruelty and false arrests were already serious. Using a badge to isolate and coerce a vulnerable young woman revealed something far more dangerous. "How long have you been inside this cell?" "Since before the morning began," Tessa replied. "I heard them talking about someone named Jordan." Mercer kept asking whether I knew where Jordan was. He said my answer would decide how long I stayed here. Alana turned toward her. "Jordan Brooks?" Tessa stared at her. "How do you know his name?" "His grandmother is in the lobby trying to report him missing." Tessa covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes. "Jordan is my former boyfriend. He called me frightened. He said something happened at the repair shop where he works and that police officers were involved. Then Mercer found me." The pieces had not formed a complete picture, but the outline was already alarming. Alana shifted her wrists gently, testing the handcuffs and preserving the marks they were leaving. Through the bars, she could see a small wall clock outside the holding area. Morning roll call was approaching. Deputy Chief Bellamy would arrive with senior officers to introduce the new captain. "Do not be afraid," Alana told Tessa, her voice soft but certain. "You are not alone anymore." Tessa searched her face. "Who are you?" Alana looked toward the reinforced door through which Mercer had disappeared. Someone Officer Mercer should have treated very differently. Not because of my title, but because every person who walks into this building deserves dignity. She leaned back against the concrete wall. I was about to learn that lesson the hard way. Time moved slowly in the cold holding area. Alana remained still, preserving her strength and asking Tessa gentle, careful questions. She learned the location where Mercer had stopped her, the words he had used, the threats he repeated, and the names she had heard through the corridor. Tessa described how he returned more than once, each visit designed to make her feel more isolated. He implied that cooperation would make the non-existent charges disappear. Refusal, he warned, could turn a short detention into something far worse. Alana committed every detail to memory. Every word was evidence. Every tear was another reason the culture inside the 54th Precinct could not survive the day. Upstairs, the squad room carried an entirely different mood. Officers gathered before morning roll call, drinking coffee, trading crude jokes, and moving with the careless confidence of people who did not expect their habits to be examined. Blaine Mercer stood near the briefing podium, telling the story of the lobby confrontation as though it were entertainment. Curtis Vance leaned against a scratched wooden desk beside him. "You should have seen her expression," Mercer said. She walked in acting like some powerful attorney. One slap, and suddenly she understood where she was. Vance laughed. She looked ready to cry by the time we locked her up. Mercer took another drink of coffee. "We will leave her there until she becomes cooperative. Then we will bring her out, write a disorderly conduct citation, and send her home with a warning. People like that need to learn respect." Several officers laughed. Others looked away. No one asked whether she had been booked or whether the charges were real. The heavy oak doors opened. The conversation stopped immediately as Deputy Chief Conrad Bellamy entered the squad room. Two stern internal affairs detectives walked beside him, followed by Lieutenant Gideon Price, the shift commander. Bellamy had spent decades in law enforcement and carried himself with the direct authority of someone who had no patience for ceremony when a department was failing. His gray eyes moved across the room and narrowed when he did not see the person he had expected to introduce. "Attention," Lieutenant Price ordered. The officers rose and straightened their uniforms. Bellamy placed a thick manila folder on the podium. "This precinct has been operating under administrative review because of repeated complaints, civil judgments, and failures of supervision," he began. "The mayor has ordered a full change in command. I am here to introduce the captain who will assume control of this district immediately." He looked toward the side entrance leading from the administrative offices. No one appeared. Bellamy frowned and checked his phone. "Lieutenant Price, where is Captain Alana Merritt?" She confirmed that she would arrive early to observe the transition before roll call. Price looked genuinely confused. "I have not seen her, Deputy Chief. No one reported that she entered the building." Bellamy called her number. Deep inside the precinct, behind the desk where confiscated property had been dropped without documentation, Alana's phone vibrated silently inside a plastic bin. Bellamy ended the call. A sense of unease entered his expression. Alana Merritt was known for arriving before everyone else. She did not miss official obligations and did not disappear without communication. "Sergeant Pike," Bellamy called. The desk sergeant stood near the back of the room, trying to make himself smaller. "Did any visitor arrive asking for me, Lieutenant Price, or the new captain?" Pike shifted his weight. "No, sir. Only the usual people from the neighborhood. Complaints, loiterers, nothing important." Bellamy studied him. His instincts told him something was wrong. Then he noticed the faint smile Mercer had not managed to hide. "Officer Mercer, you appear amused. Is there something you would like to share?" Mercer straightened, still unaware of the danger gathering around him. "We had an eventful morning, Deputy Chief. A disturbed woman entered the lobby and created a major scene. She threatened officers and attempted to assault us. We had to restrain her and place her in a holding cell until she calmed down." Bellamy became very still. "Describe her." Mercer shrugged. "Black woman, early 40s, expensive charcoal coat, kept quoting department rules and acting like she was someone important, completely unstable." The color left Bellamy's face. The two internal affairs detectives shifted closer. Lieutenant Price drew a sharp breath. Every senior officer in the room understood the possibility at the same moment. Bellamy's voice became dangerously quiet. "You placed a woman matching that description in a holding cell." Mercer's smile weakened. "Did you enter her arrest into the system? Did you photograph and fingerprint her?" "She was resisting," Vance said, trying to sound helpful. "We put her in cell 3 until we could finish the paperwork." Bellamy did not take his eyes from Mercer. "Lieutenant Price, secure the front desk with the internal affairs detail. No one leaves the building. No one touches a computer, a file, or a telephone without authorization." He stepped down from the podium. "Mercer, Vance, you are taking me to the holding block right now. Pray that the woman in cell 3 is not the person I think she is." For the first time, genuine fear entered Mercer's face. Bellamy walked from the room with the two officers ahead of him and an internal affairs detective close behind. Their footsteps struck the hallway in heavy silence. Vance's breathing became audible. Mercer kept glancing toward the exits, as though the building might offer a way to escape the truth. They reached the holding area. "Open it," Bellamy ordered. Mercer's hands began to tremble as he searched through the ring of keys. He inserted one into the reinforced door and pulled it open. The smell of ammonia moved into the corridor. Bellamy pushed past him and walked quickly along the cells. He stopped in front of cell 3. Behind the bars, Alana sat calmly on the metal bench, her hands still secured behind her back. A dark bruise had begun to spread across her left cheek. Dried blood marked the corner of her split lip. Beside her, Tessa Monroe sat wrapped in a thin jacket, watching the approaching command staff with frightened eyes. "Captain Merritt," Bellamy whispered. The horror in his voice made the words almost disappear. Mercer stopped breathing. He stared at the woman he had slapped, restrained, threatened, and hidden inside an unrecorded cell. Alana rose slowly. Her eyes moved past Bellamy and settled on Mercer. "Deputy Chief," she said with smooth control, "I believe my introduction to the shift is overdue." Silence filled the holding block. Mercer's face became pale and empty. Vance looked ready to collapse. The arrogance that had carried them through the lobby disappeared in a single moment. "Unlock this cell immediately," Bellamy shouted. He seized Mercer by the front of his uniform and pushed him toward the bars. "Open it now." Mercer dropped the keyring. The metal struck the concrete and scattered an echo through the corridor. He fell to his knees, gathered the keys, and required several attempts before finding the correct one. The cell door opened. Bellamy stepped forward. "Captain Merritt, I am deeply sorry. Let me remove those cuffs." "Stop," Alana ordered. The command cut through the air. She remained inside the cell with her hands behind her. "Do not remove them yet, Conrad. I want internal affairs to photograph the position of the restraints. I want the excessive ratcheting documented. I want the failure to double lock them documented. I want the injuries around my wrists recorded before the evidence is altered." Bellamy nodded immediately and turned toward the detective. "Bring the camera. Now." Alana looked toward Mercer. "Officer Mercer also failed to mention that I was not the only person being held outside the official system." She stepped aside enough for the others to see Tessa clearly. "This is Tessa Monroe. Officer Mercer forced her into a patrol vehicle while she was walking home. She has been held without charges, without a telephone call, and without any record. He repeatedly offered to make her detention disappear in exchange for personal cooperation. He also questioned her about the location of Jordan Brooks, the missing man whose grandmother your desk sergeant refused to help. Vance made a frightened sound and stepped backward. Mercer attempted to speak, but his mouth produced only a dry whisper. "Lieutenant Price," Bellamy called toward the corridor, "bring emergency medical personnel for Miss Monroe. Give her a blanket, food and water. Detective Lenora Vale will take her statement. No uniformed officer from this precinct goes near her without Captain Merritt's authorization." An internal affairs detective entered with a high-resolution camera. Bright flashes illuminated the dim corridor as he photographed the bruise on Alana's face, the dried blood, the torn fabric near her shoulder, and the deep marks cut into her wrists by the handcuffs. Only after the detective confirmed that the evidence had been documented did Alana allow Bellamy to release the restraints. She brought her arms forward slowly. Pain moved through her hands as circulation returned. She flexed her fingers and rubbed her wrists without taking her eyes from Mercer. "Captain, I did not know," Mercer stammered. "If you had told me who you were, none of this would have happened." Alana took one measured step toward him. "That is exactly the point." Her voice was quiet enough to force everyone to listen. "If you had known my title, you would have shown respect because you feared consequences. You believed I was only a citizen, a black woman asking you to follow policy. So you thought you had permission to humiliate and injure me." She moved closer. "You did not strike me because of a misunderstanding. You struck me because this is how you behave when you think the person in front of you has no power." Mercer's lower lip trembled. Alana extended her right hand, palm upward. "Your badge." "Captain, please. I have given most of my adult life to this department." "Your badge and your weapon, Officer Mercer. Hand them over now, or I will order the deputy chief to disarm you." Mercer stared at her open hand. Slowly, he unpinned the silver shield from his chest and placed it in her palm. Then he removed his duty belt. The weight of the holstered weapon struck the concrete floor with a heavy sound. Alana turned toward Vance. "You as well, Officer Vance. You supported a false account of an assault you knew never happened. You participated in an unlawful detention, helped conceal a prisoner from the booking system, and threatened physical harm." Vance did not argue. Tears moved down his face as he removed his badge and belt. Alana handed both badges to the internal affairs detective. "Place these officers under arrest. Read them their actual rights. Process them according to every rule they denied to the people they detained. They are to be held separately at central booking. Search their lockers, patrol vehicle, personal vehicles, and department storage spaces. Preserve every report, complaint, arrest, and use of force record connected to them." The detectives moved forward. Mercer and Vance were turned around and placed in handcuffs. The clicks echoed through the same corridor where they had mocked Alana only a short time earlier. "You cannot destroy our lives over one mistake," Mercer cried as the restraints closed around his wrists. Alana wiped a small trace of dried blood from her chin. "This was not one mistake, Blaine. It was a pattern supported by a culture that taught you no one would ever hold you accountable." She looked toward the bars, then toward Tessa. "That culture ends now." The two officers were led away. Their protests faded down the hallway. Alana adjusted the collar of her coat and faced Bellamy. "Conrad, I have a roll call to address. Gather the entire shift. Nobody leaves. This precinct is going into lockdown." Bellamy looked at her bruised face and injured wrists with a mixture of shock and respect. "Yes, Captain." The reform Alana had been hired to begin was no longer an administrative plan written in a conference room. It had become an active criminal investigation. The squad room waited in suffocating uncertainty. Lieutenant Gideon Price paced beside the podium while officers exchanged anxious whispers. Mercer had been the center of the precinct's unofficial power structure. He intimidated rookies, controlled favored assignments, and seemed protected from every complaint. If internal affairs had taken him away, no one knew which part of the department would fall next. Footsteps approached through the administrative corridor. The doors opened. Deputy Chief Bellamy entered first. His expression held undisguised fury. Behind him came Alana Merritt. The room became completely silent. Alana had not cleaned away the evidence. The bruise across her cheek had deepened. Dried blood remained near her lip. Scuff marks covered the sleeve of her charcoal coat. Dark red abrasions circled both wrists. She walked to the front with measured calm and rested her hands on the wooden podium. For several long moments, she said nothing. Her eyes moved across every face in the room. She noted each officer who appeared shocked, each one who looked guilty, and each one who refused to meet her gaze. Sergeant Vernon Pike stood in the second row. When Alana looked directly at him, his knees weakened. He reached for a desk to steady himself. "For those who did not see my name on the command roster," Alana began, "I am Captain Alana Merritt. Effective immediately, I am the commanding officer of the 54th Precinct." The silence deepened. "Earlier this morning, I entered the public lobby dressed as a civilian. I watched an elderly woman ask for help and receive contempt. I asked 2 officers to follow department policy. In response, Officers Blaine Mercer and Curtis Vance mocked me, assaulted me, invented charges, and locked me in an unrecorded cell." She stepped away from the podium, allowing the entire room to see the injuries clearly. Inside that cell was a young woman who had been taken from the street, denied every legal protection, and subjected to predatory coercion by an officer wearing this department's badge. Several officers drew sharp breaths. Lieutenant Price closed his eyes briefly, his face tightening with disgust. "They acted that way because they believed I was nobody," Alana continued. "They thought I was simply a black woman who had spoken out of turn. They believed the badge protected their behavior and that this building would protect their lies." She pointed toward Pike. "Sergeant Pike, step forward." Pike moved from the line with visible trembling. "Captain, I didn't know who you were. I swear I had no idea." "That is not a defense, Sergeant. It is the charge against you." Alana's voice hardened. "You watched an officer strike a citizen in the face. You saw the unlawful arrest. You knew no booking process followed. You did nothing because you believed the victim had no influence." She turned toward the internal affairs detectives near the door. "Remove his badge and weapon. Place him under arrest for official misconduct, failure to intervene, and participation in the concealment of an unlawful detention." Pike began to cry as the detectives disarmed and handcuffed him. Watching a veteran sergeant led from the room sent a wave of fear through the remaining officers. Alana returned to the podium. "Look around carefully," she said. "The culture that controlled this precinct is over. The extortion, illegal stops, intimidation, falsified reports, missing evidence, and protection of abusive officers will be exposed. Every secret believed to be buried will be examined." She faced Lieutenant Price. "Suspend normal patrol operations for this precinct. Reroute emergency calls to neighboring districts. Lock all public and employee exits while preserving access for civilians who need immediate help. No officer touches a computer, file cabinet, evidence locker, or personal telephone without authorization." Price stood straighter. "Yes, Captain." Alana turned to Bellamy. "This is no longer only an administrative review. The entire precinct is a potential crime scene. Bring in independent forensic teams. Clone every hard drive. Secure every locker. Preserve all camera systems, dispatch records, and property logs." She looked back at the officers. "Anyone who tells the truth will be heard. Anyone who destroys evidence or warns a suspect will be arrested." No one doubted her. The 54th Precinct had spent years protecting itself from accountability. Before the day was over, every wall of that protection would begin to come apart. The precinct changed within hours. Independent cybercrime specialists arrived in unmarked vans carrying reinforced cases filled with forensic extraction equipment. Internal affairs investigators sealed the evidence rooms, photographed workspaces, and placed tamper markers across doors and cabinets. Officers from neighboring districts assumed emergency coverage while the 54th ceased functioning as a normal police station. Every workstation was disconnected from the local network. Hard drives were copied through isolated systems to prevent files from being erased remotely. Investigators collected body cameras, patrol camera storage devices, radio logs, property receipts, arrest records, and complaint files. Alana took temporary control of the captain's office, a large room that still smelled faintly of stale cigars and cheap whiskey. The former captain had left behind a mahogany desk, several locked cabinets, and the lingering atmosphere of leadership that had chosen comfort over responsibility. Alana refused to sit behind the desk. She stood over a conference table as evidence boxes, printed logs, and sealed duty weapons accumulated around her. An emergency medical technician had cleaned her split lip and placed a cold compress against her cheek. Deputy Chief Bellamy urged her to go to a hospital for a full examination, but Alana refused to leave until Tessa was safe and the building was secured. The pain sharpened her attention. Every pulse in her cheek reminded her what civilians had endured inside the same walls without authority, witnesses, or anyone willing to believe them. Detective Lenora Vale entered carrying a thick manila folder. She was one of the few internal affairs investigators Alana trusted completely, a methodical detective known for following evidence long after other investigators lost patience. "Captain," Vale said, placing the folder on the table. "We finished searching Mercer's locker, patrol vehicle, and personal car. You need to see this." Alana looked up from a stack of heavily redacted force reports. "What did you find?" Vale opened the folder. Inside were several transparent evidence bags. Some contained thick rolls of cash held together by rubber bands. Others contained keys, prepaid telephones, and handwritten receipts. "The cash is close to $50,000, Vale said. "None of it is connected to a lawful seizure or a documented source." She placed a smaller bag in front of Alana. Inside was a black leather notebook. "This is the most important item. Mercer was not only taking money from vulnerable people during patrol stops. He was running an organized protection operation." Alana put on gloves and opened the notebook carefully. Pages contained dates, initials, badge numbers, street names, and amounts written in precise columns. Vale continued. "The ledger shows recurring payments from illegal gambling rooms, a vehicle theft operation on the east side, and 2 narcotics distributors. Mercer collected money in exchange for police protection. His patrol car escorted shipments, warned businesses before raids, and redirected honest officers away from protected locations." Alana scanned the pages. "Who else was involved?" "The names are coded," Vale replied. "But we compared several dates with arrest records. Whenever someone stopped paying Mercer, Officer Vance received a confidential source tip. The night shift then raided the business or arrested people connected to it. They were using department authority as a private enforcement service." Alana felt a cold pressure form in her stomach. This was not random misconduct by 2 arrogant officers. It was a coordinated criminal organization using uniforms, vehicles, and public information to control illegal business. "What about Jordan Brooks?" Alana asked. "His grandmother was in the lobby because he had not returned home." Vale removed another sheet from the folder. "I began reviewing that case as soon as you described it. Jordan works as a mechanic at the East Side vehicle shop listed in the ledger. The shop was attacked during the night by a rival group. 2 people were killed. Jordan escaped." Alana stared at the document. Mrs. Brooks was not being ignored only because Pike was lazy. "Exactly," Vale said. "Mercer and Vance needed to locate Jordan before he spoke to investigators. Jordan knows Mercer protected the shop. He may also know where payments were stored and which officers visited." Alana looked toward the evidence from Mercer's locker. "And Tessa?" Vale's expression tightened. She gave a complete statement after receiving medical care. Mercer kept questioning her about Jordan because they had dated. He took her from the street to use her as leverage. If Jordan learned she was being held, he might reveal his location. Alana closed the ledger. "They were going to use her as bait." "That is our working conclusion," Vale replied. Mercer expected to frighten Tessa until she contacted Jordan. Then officers loyal to him could find and silence the witness. Alana pressed one hand against the conference table. The betrayal extended beyond corruption for profit. Sworn officers were hunting civilians to protect their own criminal network. "Where is Jordan now?" "We do not know. If he survived the attack, he is frightened and probably assumes every badge in Bellwether City belongs to Mercer." Alana's mind moved through the possibilities. Mercer was in custody, but others named in the coded ledger remained inside or outside the building. Someone loyal to him might already be searching for Jordan. "We need the code translated," she said. Sergeant Pike sat at the front desk for years. He knows the night shift, the radio phrases, and the unofficial chain of command. Vale nodded slowly. "He may request a lawyer and refuse to speak." Alana touched the swollen skin on her cheek. "Pike is not loyal. He is frightened. He protected Mercer because Mercer appeared untouchable. That illusion is gone." She lifted the black notebook. "Bring him to interview room A." The fluorescent light inside the interview room produced a low, electrical hum. Sergeant Vernon Pike sat at the metal table with his hands secured to the restraint ring. Sweat moved down his cheeks, and his uniform shirt clung to his back. He flinched when the steel door opened. Alana entered alone. She carried no notepad and did not bring another detective to perform a rehearsed good officer and bad officer routine. She brought only Mercer's black ledger. She dropped it onto the table. The sound made Pike jump. Alana remained standing. She walked slowly around the room and allowed the silence to build until Pike's breathing became uneven. "You have served this department for more than 2 decades, Vernon," she said. "You expected a pension, a quiet retirement, and the protection of officers who called you family." Pike stared at the table. "Your personnel file lists your wife, Diane, and your daughter, who is completing a nursing degree. You built your future around the belief that the department would continue protecting its secrets. Captain, please. Right now, you are facing serious charges connected to racketeering, unlawful detention, conspiracy, and official corruption. If the evidence shows that you helped conceal a kidnapping or warned people inside Mercer's network, you could spend many years in federal prison." Pike released a broken sob. "You don't understand. Mercer controlled everything. If I challenged him, he would plant narcotics in my locker or accuse me of stealing evidence. He destroyed people who crossed him." "He has already destroyed the life you expected," Alana replied. She stopped behind him and leaned close enough for her words to reach him without rising in volume. "The only question left is whether you continue protecting him while innocent people remain in danger." Pike squeezed his eyes shut. "You are going to identify every initial and badge number inside this ledger. Then you are going to tell me where Jordan Brooks is hiding. If Jordan is harmed because you withhold information, prosecutors will examine whether your silence made you responsible." Pike's entire body trembled. "It is already happening, Captain." Alana moved around the table. "What is happening?" Mercer received information before roll call. Someone said Jordan was hiding at the abandoned Stanton rail yard on the west side. Mercer sent officers Colton Briggs and Wade Farrell to take care of it. "Take care of it how?" Pike looked at her with terrified eyes. "They are not going there to arrest him. They are driving an unmarked black sport utility vehicle. They were told to make sure Jordan never speaks." Adrenaline flooded Alana's body with cold precision. She turned, opened the interview room door, and stepped into the corridor. Detective Vale and Deputy Chief Bellamy were waiting. "We have 2 armed officers operating outside the system," Alana said. "Colton Briggs and Wade Farrell are heading to the Stanton rail yard to kill Jordan Brooks." Vale's expression hardened. "I want location data from their department phones, personal devices, vehicle trackers, and every unmarked unit signed out by this precinct," Alana continued. "Conrad, activate the tactical response team. No officer from the 54th joins the operation. We use internal affairs, state investigators, and officers from outside districts only." Bellamy immediately reached for his radio. Alana looked back through the interview room door. "Keep Pike separated. Record every name he provides. If he stops cooperating, remind him that a witness's life is measured in minutes." The response moved quickly. Independent tactical officers gathered in the underground garage beneath police headquarters. Unmarked armored vehicles formed a convoy, while communications specialists confirmed that a black sport utility vehicle associated with the 54th Precinct was moving toward the industrial west side. Alana pulled a protective vest over her trench coat. She checked her service weapon, secured it in a holster, and entered the lead vehicle beside Detective Vale. Deputy Chief Bellamy traveled with the tactical commander. Rain struck the windshield as the convoy moved through the city. The bruise on Alana's cheek pulsed with each rough section of road. She welcomed the pain. It kept her focused on the people Mercer had treated as expendable. Tessa was safe. Jordan was not. The Stanton rail yard occupied several abandoned blocks near the river. Rusted freight cars, stacked shipping containers, broken warehouses, and overgrown tracks formed a maze of steel and shadow. Rainwater collected inside deep ruts along the access road. The black sport utility vehicle appeared near a partially collapsed warehouse. The tactical convoy accelerated through the open chain-link gate. Powerful searchlights ignited, flooding the rail yard with white light. "Move, move, move," Alana ordered over the radio. Doors opened across the convoy. Tactical officers formed disciplined lines behind armored vehicles. Through the rain, Alana saw 2 men in dark civilian clothing near the black sport utility vehicle. Holsters were strapped to their thighs. They were dragging a young man toward the open rear compartment. Jordan Brooks was bruised, bleeding from a cut near his hairline, and struggling weakly against them. "Police, release him and show your hands," Bellamy commanded through the vehicle speaker. A line of rifles trained on the two officers. Colton Briggs panicked. His right hand moved toward his holster. "Do not touch that weapon, Briggs," Alana shouted. She stepped from behind the lead vehicle with her own weapon aimed steadily at his center mass. The searchlights illuminated her bruised face, torn coat, and unwavering expression. Briggs froze. Wade Farrell immediately raised both hands and dropped to his knees in the mud. "I surrender. Don't shoot." Briggs looked at the aiming lights across his chest, then at Alana. Whatever he saw in her expression ended the calculation. Slowly, he lifted his hands and lowered himself to his knees. Tactical officers moved forward, separated the suspects from Jordan, removed their weapons, and secured them in handcuffs. Alana lowered her pistol and hurried toward Jordan. He collapsed onto the wet gravel, breathing in short, frightened gasps. She knelt beside him and placed one hand gently on his shoulder. "Jordan, you are safe now." He looked up, unable to understand why a police captain was speaking to him with kindness. "My name is Captain Alana Merritt. We found Tessa. She is safe, and your grandmother is waiting for news." Jordan's face changed. Tears mixed with the rain. "They killed people at the shop," he said. "Mercer came there all the time. He took money. He said if I talked, he would make me disappear." "He will never wear a badge again," Alana replied. "Neither will the officers who brought you here." Jordan covered his face and began to cry. For the first time since the attack at the shop, the fear inside him began to release. Medical officers moved in with a stretcher and blankets. Detective Vale approached Alana through the rain. Briggs and Farrell had a department radio programmed to a private channel. There are messages directing them to destroy Jordan's phone and leave his body near the river. "We have the entire chain." "Preserve everything," Alana said. "Their vehicle, phones, clothing, and weapons all go directly to outside evidence teams. No one connected to the 54th touches a single item." Vale nodded. Behind them, Briggs and Farrell were placed into separate vehicles. The corrupt officers who had used the city as their hunting ground were now prisoners beneath the lights of an independent tactical team. Alana looked across the abandoned rail yard. The criminal network inside the 54th Precinct had not merely protected illegal businesses. It had attempted to erase a witness and exploit a young woman to locate him. The reform could no longer stop at dismissals or administrative discipline. Every person involved would face criminal investigation. The rescue at the rail yard broke the final protections surrounding Mercer's organization. Briggs and Farrell began blaming each other before the rain had stopped. Their phones led investigators to private message groups used by officers, gambling operators, vehicle thieves, and narcotics distributors. The coded entries inside Mercer's ledger matched payments, patrol routes, selective raids, and property that had disappeared from the evidence system. Sergeant Pike translated the initials and badge numbers. His cooperation did not erase his failure in the lobby or the years he spent looking away, but it gave investigators a map of the network. Several officers were suspended before the end of the day. Others were arrested after searches uncovered cash, stolen property, falsified reports, and private records of illegal payments. Blaine Mercer was connected to the protection racket, Tessa's unlawful detention, the attempt to silence Jordan, and a long series of stops in which property disappeared after citizens were threatened. Curtis Vance had supported false reports and helped identify people who resisted the operation. Colton Briggs and Wade Farrell faced charges connected to the attempted killing of a witness. The former captain's locked cabinets revealed why discipline had failed for so long. Complaint summaries had been removed from official files. Internal review dates had been changed. Use of force reports were signed without supporting video. Several officers received favorable evaluations after incidents that should have resulted in suspension. Deputy Chief Bellamy ordered every complaint connected to the precinct reopened under independent supervision. State investigators and federal civil rights attorneys joined the review. Former detainees were contacted. Wrongful arrests were examined. Families who had been ignored were finally invited to speak without the officers they feared sitting inside the room. Mrs. Evelyn Brooks was brought to the hospital where Jordan received treatment. When she saw her grandson alive, she held him with both arms and cried into his shoulder. Tessa arrived soon afterward under the care of Detective Vale and a victim advocate. The reunion was quiet, painful, and filled with the relief of people who had believed they might never see one another again. Alana visited them without cameras or reporters. She apologized on behalf of a department that had treated their fear as an inconvenience. She promised no impossible recovery and offered no empty reassurance. She simply explained that their statements would matter, their safety would be protected, and the officers responsible would face a lawful process. Jordan looked at the bruise across her face. "They did that to you too," he said. Alana nodded. "They believed power meant deciding whose pain counted. What happens now? Now we prove they were wrong." The criminal cases moved forward with overwhelming evidence. Audio from the lobby, statements from witnesses, forensic records, financial ledgers, private messages, and evidence recovered from the rail yard created a case too large to dismiss as one misunderstanding. Mercer and the officers closest to him eventually received long federal prison sentences. Their badges were permanently revoked, their pensions were lost where the law allowed, and they were barred from returning to law enforcement. Sergeant Pike received a lesser sentence after extensive cooperation, though he never regained the career or reputation he had sacrificed through cowardice. His testimony helped identify officers who had participated directly and those who had protected the operation through silence. The 54th Precinct was placed under strict outside oversight. Training changed. Complaint procedures were rebuilt. Security cameras were restored and protected from local tampering. Every detention required immediate entry into a centralized system. Civilian visitors received written confirmation when reports were filed. Supervisors were required to review footage, restraints, searches, and the treatment of vulnerable people. Alana remained in command. She did not rebuild the precinct through fear, even though many officers feared her. She rebuilt it through consistency. Honest work was recognized. Misconduct was documented. Officers who admitted mistakes and corrected them were treated differently from those who lied to protect abuse. Community meetings were held inside the same lobby where Mrs. Brooks had once been dismissed. Over time, residents began entering the building without lowering their eyes. Calls for help were answered. Missing person reports were taken seriously. Young officers learned that loyalty to the law was more important than loyalty to a colleague who violated it. The bruise on Alana's cheek eventually faded. The memory remained. She kept the damaged gold earring that had fallen onto the lobby floor. It stayed inside a small drawer in her office, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. A leader could never judge a department only by how officers behaved when a captain was watching. Character revealed itself in the treatment of people believed to have no influence. That was the truth Blaine Mercer failed to understand. Power does not create character. It exposes it. A badge, a title, a weapon, or a position of authority gives a person more opportunities to reveal what already lives inside them. In the hands of someone guided by integrity, power can protect, reassure, and restore trust. In the hands of someone ruled by ego, it can become permission to humiliate and harm. Alana's strength was not found in revenge. She could have used her new authority to ignore procedure and punish everyone who had offended her. Instead, she preserved evidence, protected witnesses, separated honest mistakes from deliberate crimes, and placed each case into the hands of independent investigators and courts. Accountability is strongest when it remains fair. Tessa and Jordan also carried lessons from what happened. They had been made to feel invisible, yet their voices helped expose a system larger than either of them understood. Speaking after abuse required courage. Being believed gave that courage somewhere to go. Sergeant Pike and Officer Mercer represented two different kinds of failure. Mercer chose cruelty because it made him feel powerful. Pike chose silence because he was afraid. Their motives were different, but both choices allowed innocent people to suffer. Fear can explain silence, but it cannot make silence harmless. There are moments in ordinary life when people are asked to look away. A coworker is humiliated. A stranger is treated unfairly. A person with authority changes the story to protect themselves. Speaking up may threaten comfort, approval, or security. In those moments, character is not measured by what we privately believe. It is measured by what we choose to do. Forgiveness does not mean pretending the damage never happened. It does not require a victim to trust someone who has not changed. Forgiveness can exist beside consequences. It can mean releasing the desire to become as cruel as the person who caused the harm, while still insisting that the truth be acknowledged and future victims be protected. Alana understood that a clean precinct could not be built only by removing corrupt officers. It also required creating a culture where good officers no longer felt alone, where rookies could question unlawful orders, and where asking for help was treated as a duty rather than a burden. True leadership enters the darkest part of a system and brings light without becoming consumed by the darkness. It listens before commanding. It protects the vulnerable without using them as symbols. It accepts responsibility for repairing trust, even when the current leader did not create the original harm. The woman Mercer believed was powerless became the captain who ended his criminal empire. But her title was never the reason she deserved respect. She deserved it when she first walked through the lobby as a citizen. So did Mrs. Brooks. So did Tessa. So did Jordan. So does every person who enters a public building, hoping someone will listen. That is the deepest lesson of this story. Dignity should never depend on who a person knows, what position they hold, or how much influence they can bring into a room. Living decently means offering respect before discovering whether the person in front of us has the power to punish our cruelty. If Alana's story stayed with you, share it with someone who believes courage can remain calm and justice can be strong without losing its humanity. Support the channel for more emotional stories about hidden strength, responsibility, second chances, and the moment truth finally reaches the light. Then consider one question. When no one powerful appears to be watching, what do your choices reveal about you?